Hello, everyone. This is Tim here, and welcome to my live demo and our Patreon project for next month, September. So this is a live demo for my Patreon members only and is being recorded, by the way. So after the presentation, you'll hopefully get an email from the Crowdcast system that we're using with a link to the recording. It will be the same location, the same URL. This Crowdcast system for Patreon uses the same URL for everything. Your registration, viewing live, those of you on live now, and watching the recording as many times as you want to. So when our little session here has finished, please allow time for the Crowdcast system just to process itself before you can play back the demo. Now, for those of you on the relevant Patreon membership level or tier, as you know, you send me a photograph of your painting and I'll give you an individual critique, which will be in writing or as a video for you. So for this demo, those of you live, you can paint along with me, or you can just watch the demo and paint afterwards. And also on Patreon, remember, I know quite a few of you have found or used the community tab on Patreon. Share your painting up there and let's get a little bit of interaction going and sharing and seeing your efforts. Now, the audio for this demo is one way only. Your microphone is on mute. If you've got a question, please click on the Ask a Question button down there, bottom of the screen. Hope you found that. I'll do my best to answer that when I reach certain steps along the way. I'll just give out your first name, by the way, or the name that you've registered with, and try and answer it as best I can. I can see in chat that you're introducing, well, a lot of you are introducing yourselves. Let's just see who we've got on here live so far. So this demo is, I should say this demo is the 27th of August, 2021. So we've got Sandra, John D, Ching, Ingo, Sheila, Greg, Linda, David, Carter, Kathy, Lynn, Teresa, Debbie, James, Joseph. Joseph's Joseph shared a few African photos with me. Some of those might be on the next one, Joseph. So be patient on that one. Hans Peter, Laurie, Suzanne, Joanne, Adam, Anne, Peter, Mike, and Maggie. So hello to all of you listening live. Right, just to describe the interface, so you found the chat. Down the bottom, there's a source photo button, a green button. So that's where you can access the source photo, kindly shared by fellow member David J. David, thanks very much for this. I'll go through this very shortly, but thanks very much, David. We're doing this sort of virtual round the world trip during COVID, when we can't get out, and well, some of us still can't get out and about. So we thought it was interesting to embark on this about a year ago or so. And we're going around the world in a sort of westerly direction. Last month we did Alexandria in Egypt, and thanks very much those of you that took part in that, and lots of lovely paintings. I think I've got through all of the critiques now, but thanks very much. We are now, so let's get down to business and this demo. This is Uganda, and well, you might be able to make out when you zoom into the photo, gives the game away about the location. A town called Kabale, I think that's how it's pronounced, Kabale in Uganda. You can do a Google on that, and you'll see lots of other images actually in this town. And what attracted me to this scene was, I think it's quite a simple scene to paint, this town scene, in that we've got these sort of bands of the things going on. So there's a simple background, trees on the right, a row of shops, maybe some quite complicated things going on here right in front of the shops with people that you can make out, and vehicles and pickup trucks. There's a truck there. There's a bright blue Uganda telecom lorry, service lorry or something there, more produce or something there, and it continues on the right hand side. Quite a complex shop fronts as well. How are we going to handle that? And then coming forwards, what attracted me to this was this lovely color, warm color of the road, which must be fairly it's got a hard surface, compact, because we've got people cycling along, but a lovely color. And you just got to, when I look at this color, I think, how can I replicate that color? And I think at the moment, from my palette, and I'll cover my palette, I think at the moment I'm seeing little bits of light red and some cooler red, some alizarin crimson in there somewhere, pinkish color. There's a few little chips or something here. There's some harder stones in the middle and over to the right. Yeah, and then of course there's people. We've got people. As you know, I do like including people in a street scene. We can't have a street scene without any people. It looks like the end of the world is nigh, and we've got to have some people in there. So loads of people here. Now, for this demo, for this painting, you could copy some of these people. No problem with that. I tend to, well, sometimes I might copy figures. Like this figure might be quite easy to copy. That one there with the shirt out and that hands almost behind his back walking towards us. Yeah, there are some simple figures dotted around, and some cyclists as well. A little bit complicated here because the cyclists are coming towards us. So we've got that, trying to get the elliptical shape. It's a little bit like, do you remember the Shanghai painting we did with all the Shanghai cyclists in the rain? This is going to be a simpler version of this. I don't think this is ultra difficult, but the cyclists, a couple of cyclists there. Ignore this guy on the right. There's a motorcyclist here. You could zoom in there for that figure. And the seated figure astride the motorbike. I'm gonna include something of, I'm gonna imagine there's a parked car here. So just have a little bit of light from the car against a darker background. Now this is where Uganda is. We're fairly close to the equator. My geography is not my hottest, but I can imagine the sun is quite high up. It's a bright day, but it's overcast. There's no shadows. You can see a sort of soft. Do you see under the bicycle wheels? There's a little bit of soft shadow. How are we going to do that in watercolor to get those little soft shadows? No hard edges, soft edges. And then there's little bits of street furniture. These poles here, wires going across, a sign here, bits of litter around. Yeah, quite an interesting scene, I think. So hopefully we'll make a good job of it. Let me describe my materials for this demo before we start. I'll ask if there's any questions before I start. So I think there's 3 questions so far. Right, paper is Saunders Waterford cold press, 300 grams in weight, 15 inches by 11 inches, taped down with some masking tape, ordinary DIY masking tape. Paints I'm using are from Mark Jackman. They're Jackman's Art in the UK, handmade paints, and they are neutral tint burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, viridian green, cobalt green. Probably won't be using those today. Cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow. All right. A few mixing wells here. My water's over to the right. A sponge. Brushes I'm going to be using a Raphael Soft Aqua, a Winsor & Newton Squirrel mop brush. With brushes, I'm going for brushes that have got good water holding capabilities and a good point and a good edge. I think actually these, I've had these about a year, and I think after about a year you kind of want to inspect your brushes and just see if they need replacing. This one, I don't know where you can see, but it's not as pointed as it could be, but it's all right for laying down a wash. And then I may have some synthetic round brushes again with a good point to them for smaller detail work, or probably some of the figures. So that's the brushes. I'll be starting off by doing an initial drawing of the scene, getting the main components in. I've described roughly what I'm going to be doing, and I think this photo is sort of all right. I might raise the horizon just a little bit, make the background hills just sort of slope down this sort of way, just to include more of this lovely red road here, this red street. Right, so let me just check the questions. Also, when you listen back to the recording, you can click on the you can click on that question button, and you can jump to the part of the recording where I read out the question and I give my particular answer. So, Mike, I think I've answered your question about the size of paper I've done and the materials I'm using. Question from Sandra. Do you do any proportion figuring between your photo and your paper size before you draw it, or do it by eyeball? I eyeball it. I just, I guess I try and visualize subconsciously the image on the paper, but no, I don't do any grids or proportion figuring. If that's your question, Sandra, good question. Ingo, do you know at the beginning if you also want to paint this hazy mood? Well, yes, I do. I sort of described the sort of sunlight conditions here, and there's very few really dark darks or dark shadows. No very light lights either. I mean, you can imagine if the sun was out here, it would be very intense, and maybe some of the shadows wouldn't be particularly long, depending on the time of day, of course. I think it's sort of, I would think this is sort of midday-ish when this photo was taken. Oh, I've just seen there's a bird on the wire there. That's the trouble with looking at a photo. You look at it too long, and then you're just picking up all the details, and you then just get, you can then just get bogged down in the detail. So simplification is the key here. And yes, hopefully that answers your question, Ingo, on the lighting. And last question for Anne: what brand are the round brushes? Now, these round brushes, they are from a UK company or a UK supplier called WH Smith. Anyone in the UK will know their name. You see them in airports. These brushes are about, I think they're about at least 30, 35 years old. I was just rooting through my old art materials from way back, and I just came across this set of brushes. and just tried them a few times, and I actually quite liked them. They probably would have been very cheap at the time. I can't remember ever using them, but I've got them out. The point also has, you won't be able to see it, but the point has got a little sort of hook on it. But when that's wet, when that's damp, that's going to give me an exceedingly sharp point, where I could almost do those power lines with that, or little thin marks with it. Yeah, it's WH Smith, but to be honest with you, if you go through, and the hairs are sort of a golden color. This one's a little bit dirty, but the hairs are a little bit golden color. So you may be able to find a similar supply. I'm sure there are many other suppliers of these, but this is, if you're in the UK, if WH Smith still do them, these are over 30 years old, synthetic round brushes, and that's a size 8, that one. This will be a size 10. It was a size 12, and it's a size 10. So I'll be using those towards the come on again as the detail phases. Right, I don't think there's any more questions. Oh, Ravi's just joined us. Hello, Ravi. Ravi N. Right. Initial drawing then with a soft pencil. This is a 3B pencil. And I'm just going to get in the main objects, the main shapes, but maybe spend a little bit of time getting some of the figures right, or the cyclist right in the car. All right. So first of all, let's get in where the buildings are going to be. And I'm going to start, I often start in the top left corner with buildings, the rooftops of buildings, and there's a sort of stepped building there, and it comes down a little bit. The main row of buildings, let me go back to the photo. These main row of buildings, look at the angle. It's going slightly up, or almost level, but just a little bit up by a degree or two, giving a sense that that's sort of away down to the left there, and over on the right hand side just a little bit closer to us. So again, starting from the left hand side, hopefully these lines, I'll make these lines a bit darker. I don't think they're showing up too well. Let's go in a little bit darker there, and then as we go up here, and it doesn't need to be a continuous line here, just a bit of a, it's a slightly lower building in the middle, and then it might go up a little bit, creamish building over to the right hand side. Now over on the right hand side there's another building that has a level top to it and comes down, of course, vertically, something like that. Base of the building, street level, ground level. I'll just draw this in lightly first of all. And honestly, we've got to have not a straight line here. You've got to imagine all of the bits and pieces of cars and rubbish and paraphernalia, people that's outside these shops. I'll introduce some cars or something in there in a minute. Right. Okay. The background hills are going to be something like that. And then we have some trees here. And there's a sort of hill. I sense a hill, a wooded hill going up on the right hand side with some brighter trees there. So trees in the distance and then some brighter trees there. Okay, now coming towards us, thinking about a balance to this composition. My thinking is a car, imagining a car parked up here. So car there. Or actually, let's get in. I'll rub that out. Let's get in. Have that one behind. Let's have a couple of cars. Let's have a bigger one, bigger car. And the rooftops will be similar sort of height. So that's a smaller car behind, bigger car here. Or it could be a pickup truck or something like that. There. Maybe some people on the left-hand side. A lot of the figures have got light tops, light shirts, and quite dark trousers or skirts. There's a sort of pattern going on. Do you see? Light top, darker bottom, light top, darker bottom, light, dark, dark, light, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. All right. So maybe we'll do some negative painting around some of these figures just to. I'm going to ignore that motorbike on the left-hand side. Let's just get in some figures here. Just some loose figures, maybe a figure in the middle here. Using that top of that car as a guideline, car or pickup truck, using it as a guideline. Let's have a there's that lady there with a darker skirt and then carrying a bag like that. Now, in the middle, I'm going to ignore this blue truck. I'm 50-50 whether to include that. I might put something blue in, but I just think if I spend a lot of time doing that truck, I'm just sort of ending up copying this photo, and that would end up being a focal point, and you can't really, got something covering it here, and it's a funny sort of truck, that as well. So I'm not going to do that. Let's have some more people in the background here. Now, cyclists, these cyclists, let's get in this first one, starting with the top. Short sleeves, face, and then handlebars, and front wheel, back wheel, like that. These two guys here, this one's carrying, gosh, they must be really clever with their balancing. This one's got like a big rug or carpet and a box on the back, resting on the back sort of shelf there, and this one's got, well, it looks like there's a bunch of bananas there and a bunch of bananas here. Now I'm not going to draw in those bananas because it might look, when I end up painting it, it might look like this guy is being chased by a bush or something. So I'm just going to keep it simple, just a basic bicycle. Let's imagine that. Oh, he's got a cap as well. So a cap. So there's the head and shoulders, short sleeve shirt. Front handlebars. The front forks of the bike. Now this bicycle is a little bit more tricky because we can see more of the sort of side of the bicycle. So let's just get in the, this is why it's so similar to that Shanghai one that we did. Front wheel and back wheel is going to be around about there. Maybe that hat's just a little bit too big. And then sort of something going on there. It's quite difficult to see what's going on in the middle of the bicycle. Right, that is that main cyclist. Then as we're coming over, so that's that guy there, hat, no veggies on the back. This guy here, well, there's a lady there sort of silhouetted against the background. Looks like there's a covering or something above her head. Right, let's just get this other figure in here, just slightly smaller. So dark trousers, face and arms. Like that. So figure-wise, I think that's it. Maybe we'll have some more figures in the background. There's that lady here. And more figures in the background. Just randomly place them. Don't want them to be too equally spaced. All right. Maybe another bicycle in there. There are some funny details on the shop fronts. I'm not sure how much of that I'm going to put in. And then the road sort of, the road, it's almost got like a bit of a bend in the road here. I imagine it sort of goes around there and then maybe there's another main road going down that way. So we can sort of indicate that with a few lines, but there's a lot of sort of softer lines coming this way. Oh, there's a little bit of green over here on the right hand side. Couple of windows. There aren't too many. There's a sort of extension there or a roof. And some power lines dotted around. Right, I think that is it done for the build for the main objects. There we go. I'll try and keep the base of those buildings quite loose, just to give the indication of something going on immediately in front of those shops. Right, that is it. Have I got this cyclist right? That cyclist is sort of all right. Are the wheels too small on this one? No, I think it's all right. And we've got the front fork, we've got the handlebars there. Yeah, just remember not to make that hat too big. In fact, I'll just rub off the top bit there. And let's just think about this a bit more, so that head is there like that, and the hat just a little bit smaller. That's better. There we are. And head. Shadow from the peak. Okay, right. So that's the drawing stage done. Next stage will be laying down a wash, covering most of the paper, sky, maybe the underlying wash for the road, background buildings, painting around these figures, remembering the light tops. That will be the next step. Let me just see if there's any questions. And of course, these questions are only for Patreon members live. If you're watching this through a recording, this interactive questions are not possible. Joseph, this is not a question, only to say that I found a very interesting video that explains how to draw wheels, car or bike. They are ellipse, but due to perspective rules, the axles can have curious inclination. And Joseph's given a YouTube video location. Thanks very much, Joseph, for sharing that. You'll be able to see that if you go to Joseph's question and jump to that section. Thanks very much for that, Joseph. And Peter, is that a Holbein palette you're using? Yes, it is. I'm not sure which one it is, but if you count the number of wells, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. There's 24 wells, so maybe that will give you a clue. I'm not sure what model it is, Peter. And Ravi, having worked in Nigeria, Western Africa, I remembered the reddish soil there too. I was told that it was due to high iron contents. That could be a very good comment, a good point on that, Ravi. Thanks very much indeed for that bit of insight into the area. Yeah, but it's a lovely, get a picture of it. It's a lovely red though, isn't it? Beautiful. You can imagine it's sort of quite fertile soil as well. Okay, don't think there's any more questions. Let's get on to painting there. Laurie is asking, can you repost the YouTube link? Joseph, if you put it in the chat, the Crowdcast chat, then it'd be another place for us to see that. Right. So, covering most of the scene, sky, buildings, the base color of the road. My plan on the road, I mentioned these little stones here, these little chips and things. I might lay down a base color of the color of those stones, let it dry, then apply another thin wash over the top of that, and then adding in these gorgeous reds and painting around these little chips there. That's my plan anyway. Right, sky. Big brush first of all. Just a fairly light wash of yellow ochre in the sky, covering all of that sky area. And then we'll come down. In fact, we go over the whole lot. And down to these buildings. Now, as I come down these buildings, I could go a little bit warmer, browner with, oops, there's a bit of green in there. A little bit browner with the color, and using my brush, just really be a little bit more delicate with some painting around some of these figures and cars and so on. So this is just the base wash. I will go in a little bit darker with the brown here, just to give that base. There's my two tops of the cars, and then over. Buildings, carefully around the hat of the main cyclist, and then down. Now, base color for this road. Thinking about the color of the lighter chippings. So let's use a bit of my cadmium red, a bit of light red, and just test it a little bit on the paper. So a fairly light wash here. Just covering up the paper. Don't need to be too precise with this wash. Doesn't matter if I leave little bits unpainted. They could be lighter stones or bits of litter. Around that figure there, and over to this bottom right corner. There we are. That is it from a painting point of view, the wash. Right, have I covered most things? Yes, I have. There we go. Yeah, quite happy with that so far. Now I'll just let this dry a little bit before the next step will be to do the background hills and get in the second coat for the road. Okay. Now I'll just test how damp this is. Oh, it hasn't dried at all. Let me just speed up the process a little bit with my hairdryer. Excuse me a second. Excuse the noise here. There we are. I think that's all right. Yeah, that's a lot dry now. And the papers, I don't know whether you noticed, but it was buckling a little bit, which I normally don't mind. But now that's a lot flatter. Right. So for this next stage, I'm going down a size in brush. So this is what I would call a medium-sized mop brush, a squirrel mop brush, very soft, and allow me to really apply color without damaging the layer below. Right, let's get in these background hills. Let me just bring back the photo. Think about what color this is. It's very light in value. We can't really see what's going on. Yes, if you look closer, you can see maybe some hedgerows, trees, but overall it's sort of like a light bluey, maybe a little bit of green, but a light blue really should do it. I'm going to choose maybe a bit of cerulean and the cobalt, I think, for this. Not too strong a color. We want to try and push it back. So just making sure I've got a well loaded brush of water, and let's mix up a little bit of this cobalt. Maybe a little bit of that cerulean. It's just slightly more opaquish blue. And little test, yeah, I think that's all right. So starting from the top, and then there's on the ridge, we can just make out sort of shapes of trees in the distance. And then we'll gradually come down. So I'm not doing brush strokes like this. I'm just almost stabbing at it, where I can introduce just a little bit of variation in value, just to maybe give the impression of a tree there or some darker foliage. All the way down to the tops of the buildings. Right, let's just continue on. And then we're down to the top of the left-hand building. And just to the right of that building, we will come further down and just complete these background hills, tops of the buildings. Over to the right. Now, and while that's still damp, I can go into it and add in some darker little colors. Not too much. Don't want to be too fussy with it. And once it's done, just leave it. Now over to the right, we've got a little bit of green. Let's just get the photo back. We've got a little bit of green here, and then immediately beyond it, there's these two lovely larger trees. I'm not sure what sort of trees these are, but just thinking about the sort of brighter green there, then going to a cooler, darker green in the distance. Right, more of a yellowy green first. So let's pick up a bit of this cadmium yellow, a little bit of cobalt blue. Actually, let's just mix it here. Won't be needing that blue anymore. So a little bit of a test with the brush. And I'm looking at the shapes of these little trees and just trying to think what sort of brush mark could I use to replicate those. So let's come down to the top of this building. And then over to the middle, again down to the tops of the shops. Like that. As I did with the hills, I can just add in some kind of darker color, maybe a little bit of thicker cobalt, just to give the impression of the shape and form of those trees behind the shops. Right, these darker trees in the middle. I'm going to use my synthetic round brush. Maybe the side of the brush might just give me a little bit more of the texture of those trees. Right, let's just mix up something darker, ultramarine blue, bit of burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, a little bit of that previous green, actually a little bit of cobalt, tiny bit of yellow. But it is a lot darker. It's a lot darker than the hills on the left, and a little bit darker than the green there. So ultramarine blue, that's going to give me that kind of darker valium after And then thinking about the shapes of the foliage, the clumps of foliage, it's almost like it's quite dense at the top, and then it becomes less dense as it comes in towards the center of the canopy. So starting from the outside of the tree, just maybe go above the paper, just drag down. Leave a few little gaps where we can just see the sky beyond. Continue on down and over into the hills. Don't want to make them too uniform, too symmetrical. That's the word I was looking for. Too symmetrical. But it's want to get the value right. But down into those lighter green trees. And let's put in another one here. Same as the one before. Let's actually make this just a little bit more watery, so my paint's a bit too thick. And just drag this down into there. Drag it down into that greener foliage. We can also see a few tree trunks. So same brush, good point, just where we see the gaps, maybe just put in a few little branches, maybe over here as well. This tree. There. I think I'll just go a little bit darker at the base of that tree, down to the top of the buildings. All right, so I think that's my background trees done. I'll just do the road next, and I'll stop if there's any questions. Oh, Joseph, thanks very much for putting that link into chat. Thank you. Right. Oh, sorry. Hello, Joseph. You're answering. Were you answering Laura's question? Thanks so much, Joseph. Okay. Road. This is where we've got to get this red right. So I'm going to do a little bit of painting around these little thin horizontal chips in the road. Be very careful there. Oh, it's quite dark over there, isn't it? Maybe there's been some rain and we've got a little bit of a damp patch over there. So quite an interesting road surface here. I think I'm going to still be fairly light in the distance, so not make this too dark in the distance, but come a little bit more intense down towards the foreground. And I'm going to use the same brush that I used the background for. Obviously, I'm just washing off that green and blue I had, and let's use. There's a hair there. Make sure that hair is out. I'm going to mix this red color here. So let's. And I think there's a little bit of, what is that red? It's a little bit of light red and a bit of alizarin crimson, maybe a bit of that cad red. But it's very interesting. It needs sort of studying a little bit before we embark on that. So let's just add in a bit of water in there. A little bit of wheat wash of the alizarin crimson, a little bit of the light red. And starting from the shots, working our way down, and you can see how much water is on that brush. All right, so it's not fully loaded, maybe 50%. Oops. Having said that, it's just a little bit too much. I can tell when it touches the paper and a big blob comes out, just a little bit too much. It's still a bit too much. So notice just a few little bits being left unpainted. We can make those into something. Now, starting on the other side of the cars. Let's just get in the background there, the back of the road, and we can go in a bit more intense with our reds. Alizarin crimson, light red, almost 50-50. Over to the cyclist. Again, I'm not being too precise with my brush marks. Paint over the cyclist, paint over the trousers of figures, the bottom bits of figures. And then there are these little chips or stones in that central area. Just adding a little bit of coolness to that area. And then some of these stones might get a little bit bigger as we come towards us, but they're quite flat. Now continue over to the left, and the right must work quite quickly because I can see it's drying a little bit. sometimes the quicker you do this, the more effective it's going to be. And then don't muck about with it too much now, but we can do a little bit of lifting off with my synthetic round brush. So if I dampen this brush and squeeze out the water, it's still damp, and then I can just gently lift out some of this color. We can see the marks in the road. There's some darks, some lights, a little bit of light coming down there. Maybe a bit lighter in the distance over there. And so we're kind of messing up the surface. You know, we don't want to be too neat and tidy. There's a little bit of there's a darker patch over here, this darker patch here. So let's go in, not too much water. Burnt umber or burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of neutral tint. It could be quite dark. And this darker stuff seems to go into a sort of hollow, and then it comes back over the road. We can see little bits of, maybe a little bit of Aladdin crimson. So with this darker color, it's got a very fine point, you see, so I can just touch the surface a little bit. The paper's still damp. I'm getting in little soft bits. There's a little bit of green coming down here. My yellow, ultramarine blue. And there's little bits of green in the middle foreground, sorry, the middle ground area as well. There we are. Right, some of these chippings, I will put a little bit of tiny shadow in below them. So a bit of neutral tint, bit of ultramarine blue, and just where we've got these little light areas, just add a very thin, could be a tiny bit of shadow or something. It's an overcast day, but very bright. There. Wherever I see these little white patches, add in a tiny bit of, just a tiny bit of shadow. below them. These over on the right hand side as well. Maybe something dark coming from the right. Well, there's some tiny little bits there. But don't overdo this stage, just give the impression of some of those stones in the middle. There are some darker lines going through. Think about the curve of the road. So I'm just using almost dry brush marks here to indicate some of those lines in the road. Not too much. And if I think I've overdone it, I can quickly lift it off with my finger like that. There we go. All right. Now, let me just see if there's any questions before I go on to the next stage. The next stage will be the background buildings, the shops. That's going to add a bit more. It's going to add some more darks into it. So shops, and then the cars and the figures and the cyclists there. Right. Any questions, please? No, I don't think there's any questions. All right, let me go on to the background buildings. Now, what brush for these buildings? It's not a big area. I want to introduce lots of different sort of shades of the browns in there. So I think not too big a brush, maybe actually this sort of, I could do it with the medium mark brush. I think I'm going to do it with this one. I'm going to use this fairly large round brush. It could be a size 10, size 12. And then starting from the left-hand side, because I'm right-handed, work my way over. Now, let's mix them in this area here. So these buildings, let's start off with a burnt umber, a little bit of ultramarine blue, burnt umber, burnt umber, ultramarine blue. And then starting from the left, I might leave just a slither of light hitting the tops of those buildings. Just imagine that maybe there's a little bit of light up there. Again, this sort of brush, these brush direction, these brush marks I'm making gives an indication of the brick or the materials that's making up these buildings. Over to the right-hand side, down to the base of that level. Maybe we've got this little extension that comes out. Now, down to these shops. Continue on with that color. Again, I'm just going to leave a little slither of light to indicate that there's a bit of light hitting that flat roof. And well, those shot fronts, they're quite complicated to copy them exactly. I just go in fairly loose. The important thing is just to vary the intensity of the colors there in the background. Maybe go a little bit darker as we come down to the bottom of those buildings. So going over again, tops of the cars. Darker towards the base of the buildings. We'll add a bit more form to these buildings when I go in with some details of windows and doorways and some vertical elements. That's nearly completed that side. Right, let's go darker towards the bottom of these buildings. Over the tops of the figures. Be careful around that guy's cap. I nearly obliterated it. There's a sort of darker line at the top of these buildings, almost like there's a little sort of overhanging ledge, or where the rain has just made a bit of a staining. So that's that darker line. Now this building here is actually about right for the color. Let's just add in a little bit of a darker line at the top where the roof is, And there's a sort of angle down there like that, and a few windows, a couple of windows on the side there. All right, now these figures. Oh, are there any questions? Right, just looking through chat as well. Lydia, you okay? You're saying your paper's slightly off screen on the left. Not sure. So slightly off on the left. So can you see this? Can you see this area here? Okay, well, I'm not sure. I haven't changed any settings here, so I'll just continue on. Hopefully the recording will be okay with the paper dimensions, the screen dimensions. Right, now people. Okay, so let me use a smaller brush for this, a smaller round brush. So starting with the people in the distance and mixing up some flesh color. Well, a bit of neutral tint, bit of burnt umber, maybe a touch of ultramarine blue, and getting in there. Their heads, their arms, maybe there's a car here or something like that. And can we eliminate the chat? Right, windscreens of the cars. There. That's the car behind. Then the body of that car. This nearby car. And a darker shadow underneath these cars. But thinking about that softness, just using my finger just to smudge it a little bit. Now, this lady here. And then her arms and skirt. The shopping bag that she's got. Just thinking about the arms, the hand will be there, then the bag below. I'll do the shadow in a minute. Right, let's just continue over with maybe a distant cyclist there. This lady under the almost sort of under a cover or something there, but she's snuck under that by that side building. Right, cyclists. Let's start with this one first. Head. He's got an open neck shirt and then arms. Down to the arms, down to the handlebars. The bicycle itself, the back wheel, first of all, I might add a little bit of highlight to that back wheel, and then the front wheel like that. His legs. Let's add in a bit of something or other on the back of his bike. I'll paint in his clothes a little bit darker in a minute. I'm just getting in the skin tones. Now the main guy. There we are, his right arm and left arm. And then the bike itself. There's the back wheel and then the all-important front wheel. So that's the impression of that bicycle there. Again, we'll make his clothes a little bit darker in a minute. Figure on the right. And then trousers. There we go. These cars, we can, now that that's dried a little bit, we can add in just a few details of the bumpers and lights. Maybe a bit darker below. Clothing, let's just add in a bit of softer shadows to some of this lighter clothing, and they're all generally lighter clothing, but there's sort of like a slightly yellowish blouse there of that lady, a little bit of a blue here, but just to have some shadows within the clothing, just to give them a bit of form. So let's make sure my brush is well and truly clean. So lady, the yellow ochre here. There. Maybe somebody else has got a yellowish top as well. Cyclist. Let's add in some, let's use cobalt, turquoise. This figure here, that's enough. Lady there, this cyclist, let's add in a little bit of light brown to, oops, too much. A little bit of light brown. To that guy's shirt. Okay, now some details. Oh, there's a question. Let me just answer that question. Right. So Joseph, the foreground washes have practically dissolved the bike's drawing. Would have been better to use a harder pen instead of a 3B. What are the advantages, disadvantages of using too hard or soft pens? Well, exactly. The softer pencils generally give a darker line, but they could be a softer edge. I think with some of the harder pencils, you could damage the surface. I'm keen not to damage the surface or have too dark a line. I don't mind, like we can still see the pencil marks there. That doesn't really matter. There's some pencil marks showing on the windscreens. I could rub those out later on. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question, Joseph. A very good point. You just got to practice, I guess, and get used to, you know, whether it's 2B, 3B, or whatever. Okay. Right. I think that's all the questions. Let me add in a bit more detail now to the buildings and some of the softer shadows and some of the poles, power lines, and then we're almost done. So some architectural detail. I'll stick with this round synthetic brush, and we'll just add in a few little windows here and there. It looks like garage doors here over on the left-hand side. Honestly, it can be anything here. I'm just having a bit of fun here, just adding in little details where I see fit. More garage doors over here. Let's have another one about there. Down to the top of this guy. Just try and connect a few of these shapes as well. A bit of a soft shadow underneath some of these figures. So this is almost dry brush here. Bicycles. I need to add in some more sharp details to this right-hand side. Pick up this cobalt blue, have a bit of fun with that. Some windows there. And then over, got a hard edge here. And in a little bit, I'm just filling in some of the gaps in at the back of the shops, just to where I feel there's just a few too many little bits of paper showing through. Just cover them up where I might have overdone it. This guy needs a bit more shadow. Bit more shadow. Just in the where his shirt is, just give a little bit more light to the sleeves. Now, oh, darker power poles. I'm just using neutral tint, or you could, if you've got it, Payne's grey, or a burnt umber with ultramarine blue. That little blob there, I can make that into a light. There's another light there. I can see more birds on these wires, resting on the wires. I guess they're waiting for some food or something or other. Right, that's it with the darks. What I'm going to do now is get out just a tiny little bit of white paint, just to do some of the power lines and maybe some highlights to some of the figures. Now, I do need a very small brush with this, or a rig. I use this is a brush from Lebanson with it creates a very fine line. Basically, I'm just going to dampen it a little bit, and a bit more, dampen it a bit, and then pick up some white paint, just white gouache, any white, out of the tube. And where we see, let's just refer back to the photo. So these power lines here, for example, the handlebars, little bits on the bike. Look at the bottom rim, the bottom of the rim of the bicycle there, just catching a little bit of light. Tops of the heads, possibly, cars. Yeah, just within reason. Don't overdo it with the white paint. So let's do these power lines first of all. A bit more water. And one line there, not a continuous line. And then another line below that. So for a few of these lines. Very slowly. Another line there. One line there. I think that's enough. Now, tops of the heads. Let's do a bit there. So it is a bright day, but not bright sunlight. So don't want to do this too much. Bicycle handlebars. Bottom rim. And then this handlebar. Bottom rim. There we go. I'm not going to paint in all the spokes, but just maybe just a few of them, just to give the impression of it spinning around. More figures. Sometimes you can just, with little bits that you've left, you can make more figures from them. I think that cyclist is okay. Keep looking at this cyclist here just to see if the proportions are right. I think it's all right. The hat might be a bit too big. Right. Anything else? Could we have a little bit of highlight on some of these posts? Maybe some white for the car lights. And possibly with some of those power lines, there might be a few darker power lines. Make sure I've got a good point, a good edge to this brush, and just a few. I don't want to overdo it, otherwise it will draw too much attention. To the background there. Right, I think I'm just cover up a little bit of light area. I think I'm pretty much done. Says he's still mucking about. Yeah, I know what's wrong with this guy. That bit needs to be enclosed a bit more. That's better. Yeah, that's better. Right. So there we go. We were chatting to Joseph. I was answering Joseph's question about the the pen or pencil you're using. I might just rub out some of these lines just to relieve the paper of some of them, not all of them. Yeah, I think that is about it. Oh, Lydia, I think you're sorted on your orientation. Okay. Well, there we are. Uganda, Kabale. Thanks again to David J, for the kind sharing of this image, continuing our little Patreon journey around the world in a westerly direction. So those of you listening live, thanks for sticking around. Hopefully it gave you a few insights into my particular way of doing it. You don't need to copy my style now. For those of you submitting your Patreon projects, you do it your own way, but maybe I gave you a few little pointers on how I'm doing it. So thanks for everyone listening live. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to look at the posting of this project on Patreon for more detailed instructions on how to email me or send me a photo of your painting for a critique if you're on that membership level on Patreon. And then other people on Patreon, post your efforts on the community tab. Let's see your efforts and see your particular take on this Ugandan scene. But thanks very much, those of you listening live. Sue, if you send me an email, please, of your painting. I still have a few from last month, August, the Alexandria. So Sue S, if you email me or contact me, just send me your picture, please. I can't remember seeing yours, but I normally acknowledge people when they send it to me so that you know I've got it. But then the actual critique will come later to you. All right. Well, thanks very much of you, all of you listening live. Look forward to getting your critique. Thanks again, and speak to you soon. Bye-bye.